There's been a lot of other things that have happened today. The Attorney General, the new Attorney General, William Barr, was confirmed by the Senate and sworn in today in the Oval Office in a private ceremony. Andrew McCabe, the former deputy director, former acting director of the FBI, started speaking publicly about his own rather harrowing account of what happened in the FBI and in between the FBI and the Justice Department after the president fired James Comey, how much terror basically that raised in the FBI in terms of what this president might be capable of. So we're going to be watching those stories, watching those developments over the course of tonight as well. You should also know, on a smaller scale, that the White House just released the president's latest physical results. And this is a benchmark for the president's health. It's also just a benchmark in terms of normalcy and the American presidency. The president's physical used to be such a normal, predictable thing, right? With President Obama, the big drama was like, oh, is he still having a Nicorette every once in a while? You know, with George W. Bush, it was, remember there was that time he choked on the pretzel? Okay, that was just a one-time thing. It's not some bigger problem, right? I mean, that's the level of drama you would have with the president's physical. With this president, though, in the same way that his tax returns have become bizarre and contested territory, and the White House can't be counted on anymore to do things like correctly spell the names of foreign leaders and foreign countries, even still today. It's just, right? I mean, this week, they're still misspelling the names of foreign countries in official White House press releases. They're still misspelling the names of foreign leaders, even while President Trump is meeting them. Like, you never had to worry about whether or not there's a spell check on the word processors in the White House before. Like, will we ever go back to expecting these things to be spelled right? Similarly, even the president's annual physical has become weird and fantastical. And we should have known that was going to happen when his release of medical information as a candidate veered off immediately into very strange territory. We should have known that weirdness would persist when his first physical as a president ended up making a celebrity of the then White House physician, but not in a good way. Trump then tried to nominate him to his cabinet. That nomination collapsed under a cloud of all sorts of unexpected allegations about that one-time White House physician. That former White House physician is now the subject of an ongoing Inspector General investigation at the Defense Department. So now there's a new White House physician. And this one started off weirdly, too, when it comes to the president's physical. The president had his exam last week, and the White House thereafter put out a statement giving a preliminary assessment from the new White House doctor in which he proclaimed his happiness about the president's very good health. Quote, I am happy to announce the president of the United States is in very good health, and I anticipate he will remain so for the duration of his presidency, comma, and beyond. I mean, just as a scientific matter, doctor, you don't know how long his presidency is going to be. I mean, he's in his 70s, he's taking cholesterol drugs, he's a little overweight. You're saying you can confidently state, and you're happy about your personal assessment right now, that maybe more than 6 years from now, this guy will be in very good health. You can confidently state it. It's the sort of thing that doctors don't say under normal circumstances. So why are they saying that when it comes to this president? Did somebody ask you to say that, doctor? Well, now today we've got the full readout from the president's physical on the president's health. And again, it's just a little weird. Quote, with the consent of the president, I released the following health information, and we do get some basic numbers. According to the readout from the White House today, the president has gained a few pounds since last year. His cholesterol ticked down, but his cholesterol medication ticked up from last year. His heart rate is also up a tick. And this is not the most important thing in the world, but I would just draw your attention to this assertion here. Height, 6'3". This was also the president's height according to last year's physical results released from the White House. It was written in inches, 75 inches, 6'3". And on its own, as an absolute value, it doesn't matter how tall the president is. But for the record, for the history books, right, it should someday be remembered that even that is another norm broken. Even that is another weird little pointless lie that we've all been told to believe about this president, because the president may be 6'3" in his mind, but he is not 6'3" in his body. And it shouldn't matter, except for the fact that they're telling us that he is. And no, I haven't I haven't measured the president personally, but you can see him in pictures standing next to other people whose measurements have been credibly taken. For example, Mark Sanchez is a quarterback in the NFL. He is 6'2". Here is President Trump with Mark Sanchez. Mark Sanchez in the picture, clearly taller than the president. If Mark Sanchez is 6'2", a person who really was 6'3" standing next to him would not be shorter than Mark Sanchez. Here's a gentleman named Lorenzo Lamas, who is also 6'2". Here he is standing shoulder to shoulder with President Trump. He's 6'2". He is taller than Donald Trump, which means President Trump is not 6'3". Here's another man who's 6'2". His name is Justin Trudeau. He's the Prime Minister of Canada. President Trump is not a short man. He's not like Danny DeVito up there, but he is shorter than Justin Trudeau, who again is 6'2", which means that President Trump is not 6'3". Here's President Trump with Barack Obama, who is 6 feet 1.5 inches, according to his last presidential physical, back when presidential physicals weren't weird. And they weren't, well, back when they were normal occurrences. President Trump and President Obama, as you can see, are very close in height. President Obama is a little taller than President Trump, as you can see in multiple images from multiple angles. If you would like to see what it would look like if Donald Trump really was 6'3", well, here he is standing next to a man who is 6'3", whose name is Jeb Bush. President Trump is considerably shorter than Jeb Bush because Jeb Bush is 6'3" and President Trump is not. And who cares how tall President Trump is? Who cares how tall any president is? But in our lives as American citizens in this time on Earth, this will be one of the weird, pointless, vain little lies that we're expected to, I don't know, agree with or agree to let go. We're expected to believe it, maybe. We're expected to not mind it when it comes to this president, even though we know it's not true. I mean, and with elements of the federal government, like the White House Physician's Office, you wouldn't expect them to be lying to the public for no good reason, but under this president, they are. Now, in the case of the president's physical, if they're lying about his height, does that call into question that they may be lying about other things that may potentially be more material when it comes to the president's fitness and his life expectancy? I mean, how tall he is doesn't have anything to do with how long he's going to live, but are they lying about his weight or the change in his weight? Are they lying about what drugs he's on and what dosage? I mean, we don't know. I mean, once they're lying about one thing, it's hard to trust them on anything. And this is something that we never had to worry about as citizens before. I mean, to be fair, we've seen this sort of thing before from the president himself and from the people who work to promote the president. A few weeks ago, the blog Gizmodo went back to find the original source images for some stuff that the White House was putting out to promote Trump on Facebook and Instagram. On the left side of your screen from Gizmodo, you can see the original photo that was taken of the president, and it's just him pointing at some event. That was the original photo. On the right side of your screen, that's what the White House put out on Facebook and Instagram to promote the president's image. And at first glance, it looks like they just used the image to build that little meme, but of course they didn't just do that. They had to tune it up. So you can see in the change between the two images, first they gave him a little haircut. His hair was a little extra, sort of Trumpy in the back of the neck area that day. So they tuned that up a little bit, fixed his hair, made that tidier. They also gave him kind of a shoulder transplant. They gave him a whole new shoulder arm area that is more svelte and tidy and thin looking. Maybe that's just a kindness to the president's tailor, making the rough edges of his image not distracting when they wanted this image to have wider display. But, I mean, what explains this? And they literally lengthened his finger. Look, they're not moving his hand. They're just making the finger longer so as to create a new public image for this president that, for what purpose? Gives us some sense of what the world would be like if we had a president who wore finger prosthetics. I mean, this is a weird kind of vanity. It's a weird kind of playing with reality, but it doesn't mean much when it comes from the president himself, when it comes from the White House promoting the president, when it comes from, presumably his reelection campaign will put out pictures of him looking like a supermodel. But it is something different when it's the federal government of the United States of America, which doesn't just work for the president personally. They supposedly work for us and serve a public purpose. But now, apparently, we will annually be delivered an official U.S. government lie, a meaningless lie about how tall the president is. Annually, they will lie to us and tell him he is a height that he is not. And this is dumb, stuff, right? Why do we even have to think about this? It is exasperating to know how to contend with being lied to on a daily basis by our own government about things that are so petty you would never think to fact check them. But what's the alternative? I mean, do we just let them say whatever they think is true and we'll just decide to believe it? I mean, letting the truth just go as if the truth doesn't really matter on anyway, doesn't really matter anyway, on small stuff, big stuff, we don't know. I mean, letting the truth go seems like a bad slippery step at the top of a long, steep hill. But looking at those images of Trump and Jeb Bush, it actually provides a good reminder of where we were at this time in 2016, when it was not at all clear that Donald Trump would become the nominee of his party, let alone president. And the Republican presidential field was so gigantic. You might remember their debates on the Republican side were just a logistical nightmare. How to deal with so many candidates and there only being so many podiums in the continental United States. I mean, in the Republican presidential primary in 2016, when they had anywhere between 15 to 20 candidates, or maybe even more, depending on how you counted, they held a dozen debates. For the first 7 of those 12 debates, they held a main debate, and then they held what they called an undercard. So it was like the adult main candidates in primetime, the adults table. But before that, not in primetime, they'd have a kids table for candidates who were maybe not impressive enough by one measure or another to make it into the main event. That was a very awkward division from the very beginning. Literally from the first one at which the network showing the undercard debate, they panned out wide to show this image of this huge and cavernous, completely empty room in which the undercard kids table candidates were about to start debating in front of no one. In fact, for that first undercard debate, they didn't invite an audience to come watch the candidates, which was both an insult to them and also, I think, made the candidates look a little bit ridiculous on TV. The first debate had 7 candidates in that embarrassing undercard debate and 10 candidates on the main stage later that night. The one after that, they had 11 candidates on the main stage. They had 4 candidates on the kids' table debate, the undercard. By the time they got to mid-January, the saddest little undercard debate at all only had 3 people at it. That was the kids' table debate with Carly Fiorina, Mike Huckabee, and Rick Santorum. By the 8th debate, enough people had dropped out of the race that they were finally able to do just a single event with 7 candidates. That was still big enough, though, and enough of a pileup that one is the one where they had a severe logistical confusion moment, just when it came to the task of how to get all 7 of those candidates onto the stage.
Let's welcome the candidates for the Republican nomination for president. New Jersey Governor Chris Christie. Texas Senator Ted Cruz.
Businessman Donald Trump.
Florida Senator Marco Rubio.
Former Florida Governor Jeb Bush.
And Ohio Governor John Kasich.
Ladies and gentlemen, the Republican candidates.
And Dr. Ben Carson, please come out on the stage. He's standing there as well. Dr. Carson.
And Donald Trump.
And lastly, we welcome back to the debate stage Donald Trump.
Kasich. Can I introduce
It's so noisy
Kasich?
in here. Yes. We're going to introduce Ohio Governor John Kasich.
And that was when they had finally winnowed it down to still 7 candidates. I mean, that was when things were supposed to be getting more simple. At least they didn't have two different debates at that point, but it was still just a huge pileup. It's easy to screw things up. And I mean, you know, the footage, looking back at it now, it is helpful for some stuff, like being able to see Donald Trump standing next to Jeb Bush. Oh, look, Jeb Bush is way taller. Trump is not 6'3". But substantively, it's also a good reminder of how difficult the Republican Party had it when they tried to organize their primary in 2016, and when they specifically tried to organize their debates in that huge field of candidates that the Republicans had running in 2016. I mean, with that undercard plan, it was not only embarrassing to the candidates involved, it was difficult to produce. They had to keep tweaking the requirements for how candidates might make it onto the undercard to try to keep certain candidates in the field who they didn't want off the stage entirely, but they otherwise might have dropped out. I mean, it was a process that wasn't perceived to be fair, didn't do anybody any favors. Well, this year, the Democratic Party is facing a similar logistical problem because there are already maybe 10 Democratic candidates who have declared they're running, and certainly some of them are bigger names than others, but all of them deserve a shot. By the time everybody is done declaring their interest in this race, the party could very easily top the 17 major candidates who tried to cram onto various debate stages for the Republicans in 2016 to no good effect. Well, now, as of tonight, the Democratic Party has announced how they are going to try to handle their huge field of candidates this year without making some of the same mistakes the Republicans did in 2016. The chairman of the Democratic Party, Tom Perez, has had to make a lot of these hard decisions to come up with how the party is going to handle their field of candidates tonight. He's here to make some announcements next. Stay with us.
Hey there, I'm Chris Hayes from MSNBC. Thanks for watching MSNBC on YouTube. If you want to keep up to date with the videos we're putting out, you can click subscribe just below me or click over on this list to see lots of other great videos.